Kyle here from All Media Reviews, here to do another Albums of the Year series, 1978. Definitely still struggling with how I want to do this exactly and how much time it's taking. And I've kind of concluded that what I want to do is I'm just going to go with mostly what I've had for a couple years on these lists. And I mean, I'm glad I'm revisiting a lot of this stuff, but it just takes too much time to revisit. And then just some of these albums that that I don't know as well anyway. But yeah, okay, so 1978, I have like 30 albums here. I was going to go on to Spotify, but, so, alright, this isn't my first album, so, yeah, so I'll just say I don't have 10cc's Bloody Tourist on here, because I haven't heard that, and I don't know where it would go, and then Ultravox's Systems of Romance, so, okay, so, number 30 is the Ruddles that Beatles, the Beatles parody that they did, the guys from Monty Python, but it's fun. Yeah, it's humor music, but it's fun. Number 29, XTC's White Music, the debut album, I believe, which has, I believe, This Is Pop, among some other tracks that are Statue of Liberty. They're more punk, but, it's got its charm. And I know one of the guys left because Dave Gregory wasn't in the band at this point. It was Partridge and Molding and then Barry Andrews. Either that or they added Dave Gregory on the night. I forget. Anyway. Number 29. So, number 28. Don't have it. A lot of these I don't have physical. I have a lot of them, but I don't have a lot of them. Dire Straits, the self-titled. I mostly know it for Sultans of Swing. I mean, there's other songs on it, but that may find some movement. Number 27, Journey's album Infinity, which is best known probably for Wheel in the Sky, but I know a lot of Journey's singles and their history, so it has a few others which may be selling it a little bit short. Yeah, it has Lights. Forgot about it. It has Lights as well. Yeah, considering this probably should be a little higher. Again, this is just like a 1.0 version, but a lot of these other songs, yeah, and this was still when Greg Rowley was doing a lot of the vocals, and I tend to lean more toward that early stuff. But I know a lot of the hits, and some of them I still have it has Feeling That Way also, and Any Time. So yeah, I mean at 27, that's probably pretty low for it anyway. Number 26. Steve Hackett's Please Don't Touch. I can't really elaborate more on that at this time, but I'm not sure that's the one that has Vampires with a Healthy Appetite, or what's the other one? But Stepping. He had Steps. He has a song called The Steps, but I can't. One of those early albums has a couple of those songs I know from the live record. Number 25, Alan Parsons Project Pyramid, which I've heard a few times, but it doesn't have as many sort of notable singles per se, but it doesn't, he would do a couple records later that I enjoy more, but it's a record that I haven't spent a ton of time. A lot of the 78 records I find are decent. They're transitional, but they're not at the top of the band or the artist's catalog. It's interesting. So, number 24, Elvis Costello's This Year's Model, which I think that's the one that has Allison. Again, this list I made a few years ago, and I didn't have time to revisit all this stuff. So, my apologies. But anyway. Number 23, Chic, Chic, Say Chic. Say Chic, say whatever. Say La Vie. Which has Le Chic, which was their most well-known track, and it highly influenced things like Sugar Hill Gang's Rapper's Delight, and I kind of trace both Another One Bites the Dust and Billie Jean also to that bass line. But I was listening to some of that today and yesterday, and it's a kind of a dance disco funk album, but it works. I actually think it probably is a little bit low here. So that's number 23. Number 22, I finally have one of these. Boston's second album, which their debut album was a massive deal in '76. It was '78, Don't Look Back, which mostly known for the title track. The title track is excellent. It's a great track. It has a few others, Man Will Never Be. What's the other one? I thought there was one. The Journey, I think it is, and Feeling Satisfied. I mean, the sound-wise, it's very much resembles the first Boston album. I don't think the songs have quite the luster that the first Boston album, but it's still pretty good. It's a good sort of follow-up, but it's just not at the same level in terms of the songwriting. Otherwise, it'd be higher. Number 22. Number 21, The Who, Who Are You? Which I initially, when I made this list, I listened to this again the other day, and it's good. I have the picture disc. I think this is the last record, actually, with Keith Moon. The title track is excellent. I mean, even though it was a radio staple, I love that, the bridge in that little orchestral part with the piano. That's a banger track, the title track. You know, and it was kind of hit and miss. I mean, some of the other songs on here are decent. Sister Disco, Music Must Change. But, you know, it doesn't ranks within their classics. I mean, The Who, they really peaked in the early 70s, you know, late 60s, early 70s with those two rock operas and what can I think of? The album with What Won't Get Fooled Again, Bob O'Reilly. But why am I spacing on the name of it? Yeah, they have a song called New Song on here. Sisker, let's see here. Guitar and Pen. Love Is Coming Down is good. You know, so it's sort of hit and miss. I think overall this is slightly better than The Who by Numbers, which has Squeezebach. That's the most known one. If I'm choosing between the two, this is the one I would go with. But it's kind of second and third tier The Who. Who's Next? I was trying to think of the name of that album. So, and I didn't have one that followed Quadrophenia, I don't think, on my list, whenever that would have been. I forget, because I think Who by Numbers was the one after that. If I'm remembering the Who history well. After this, I have the debut solo album from Bill Bruford. I don't have the booklet. I haven't found the booklet, or the CD was probably in the jazz book I got. But Bill Bruford's Feels Good to Me, which I remember when I listened to this initially, I liked it a lot. That was right when I was totally diving into fusion. And it's good, but it's some of it kind of drags. I think the biggest reason why I have some contention with this record is that Alan Holdsworth, generally, I'm not that into his work. He has chops, but he kind of seems to noodle without really having the parts go that far. So it does have Annette Peacock doing vocals on it, which she's nice, you know, for a debut album per se, because I mean he had been in Crimson and Yes and Crimson, and he had done, I don't know if he'd done National Health at that point, played with Genesis obviously, so this was just his own thing. But yeah, Beelzebub, the opening track is one of my favorites. The last track, Adios La Parada, a La Parada, is probably my favorite track on here, actually. Springtime in Siberia, that's a ballad. The title track is decent. It has moments, but it's like the whole piece, a lot of the pieces don't fully work, and a lot of that, to me, has to do with Holdsworth. It has Jeff Berlin, and, you know, Bill, you know, he's on it, obviously, but it's not like he's featured tremendously. Anyway, feels good to me, and I don't know how many more Bill Bruford solo records I have on my list. One or two, I know some of them. I've got a couple of them, but, you know, sadly, most of it, the music, I mean, I got to liking his solo, that live record with Hell's Bells. One of a kind, I think it is good, but, anyway. That's number 20. Number 19, the second album, as many years, self-titled album, or Scratch, from Peter Gabriel. This came to some sort of insert article. I bought this on CD many years ago, right after I got into Gabriel in the early 2000s. And I remember wanting to like it more than I did, so I didn't really revisit it. It doesn't have too many songs he actually plays live much. It does have Robert Fripp, though, and it has the track Exposure, which Robert Fripp co-wrote, I guess, which is, Robert Fripp actually has the album Exposure himself. It's on that, I believe. But I think this version's slightly different, but it's hit and miss. I think the second half of this album is good, although some of it sounds a little bit like the Genesis stuff, a little bit like the Foxtrot era, maybe. But then some of it also sounds a little bit like David Bowie, which is weird because, you know, I guess because Fripp had been playing with Bowie right before this. Maybe that had something to do with it. Let's see here. Flotsam and Jetsam, Perspective, Indigo, Wonderful Day in a One-Way World. I mean, I don't like it as much as some of his more popular records from a songwriting standpoint, but it's like it highly influenced like the new wave movement, the new romantic movement in some ways. I mean, there's some punk elements to it. There's no doubt about it. But it just, DIY On the Air. I mean, these were songs like that were probably played on that tour. I don't know how often he revisited that many tracks off of this. Of course, he did the one Flotsam and Jetsam like reimagining album a few years ago. Yeah, I mean, Scratch is just mid-level Gabriel at best. But it's not his worst record, I don't think. But yeah, I can't remember what other tracks. When I did listen to this a few days ago, I would want to go back to. Yeah, I mean, Perspective, Mother of Violence. Actually, that's the one I was trying to think of. Mother of Violence is probably my favorite. I'm going with favorites besides like Exposure. Probably Mother of Violence. Anyway, number 18. Let's see. Now we're going up the list. That was number 19. Number 18, which I have this in the wrong order. I think I flipped them. Yeah, I totally have this in the wrong order. Oops. So, number 18 is his former band, Genesis, and then there were 3, which I think of most for Follow You, Follow Me, the single, which I like. I mean, some people don't like it. It's like them trying to do more overt pop. It's a great kind of romantic ballad. Undertow's another favorite on this record. Hearing that cover that was done on the Genesis tribute album, actually, I always remember Many Too Many. This is the first album without Steve Hackett in a while. Of course, Mike Rutherford takes over the guitar duties. I think I like this album slightly less than the 2 albums before it, or like more like Wind and Wuthering. But I don't think there's that much of a departure. But some Burning Rope, Ballad of Big. I mean, it's not a record I ever got attached to, but I like it better than several of the records that came in the 80s, though. Although that's, again, it's kind of splitting hairs. So that's number 18. Number 17, I can't believe I had this record as high as it was, so that one. The Police's debut album, Outlands d'Amour, which has Next to You, So Lonely, Roxanne, and Can't Stand Losing You. Those are like the biggest sort of notable tracks I got to know when I was listening to The Police a lot when my friend was playing in high school, playing them constantly. Born in the 50s, Truth Hits Everybody, Masoko Tanga. There was a debut album, granted, Andy Summers had been with like Soft Machine, and Stuart Copeland was obviously with Curved Air. The Police Sting was a teacher. I don't know if he'd been playing jazz before that, but they weren't like brand new musicians. Obviously, a new band. They were in their mid-20s at this point. But yeah, I've always liked it, but I've always sort of likened The Police had a trajectory, and this was just just like XTC, they're first out of the gate. So there's highlights and some stuff that just are not as memorable. Peanuts. I was wondering if that's about the comic book strip. Be My Girl Sally. So anyway. That's number. What did I think of? King's X. King's X used to cover The Police, and of course, King's X has a song called Sally. Sally, can I see? Kimber's got the song Sally. I think Sally Come Around, something like that. I don't know if that had anything to do with that song off the Police album, but King's X covered Roxanne and a number of Police songs in the early days when they're known as like Sneak Preview and The Edge. So, let's see here. We're going up the list. Happy the Man, which I don't have a copy of. Crafty Hands, number 16. Great, sort of mostly instrumental prog, American prog. I can't say a lot about it. I mean, from a track standpoint, I don't have copies of it. But I remember seeing them play a lot of the tracks at Nearfest, and it was awesome. Number 15, I can elaborate a bit on this album, which I don't have a physical copy of. The Talking Heads, more songs about buildings and food. Well, I haven't revisited this record in a long time. It's got 2 of their sort of well-known songs, or one, and one that I've known well for years. In Take Me to the River, and then Warning Sign. Warning Song Sign Local Natives covered in very different arrangement, but both the Local Natives version and the original version by Talking Heads I really like. But this record has some other terrific songs. Artists Only, I'm Not in Love, Stay Hungry, The Girl Wants to Be with Girls. The Talking Heads I've never really fully invested, like a lot of these bands like 10cc and ELO and Split Ends. There's a lot of these bands that Dire Straits, I've always wanted to invest more time to get to know. And Talking Heads I've always liked, but none of their albums have ever clicked with me. I've just known some of the songs that are on radio that people know. Take Me to the River's the obvious one that classic rock would play. But the rhythms are great, the energy's great. I don't mind David Byrne's vocals. He reminds me kind of, it's weird, I can see that the influence he had on not only like Phenomena and Local Natives from bands I like, but like Squid, but also XTC. There's that makes sense because they were from the same era and they were doing kind of very rhythmic post-punk of a sort at that time in the 70s. So yeah, I need to hear more Talking Heads, and this is an album I will definitely go back to. I'll be looking for on vinyl. They're not easy to find, but anyway, as much as David Byrne's vocals are a little weird at times, he's not the most impressive vocalist. His vocals tend to work for some reason. Some of the lyrics, especially, they're progressive, and the rhythms, especially, they have. They have "Burning Down the House," songs that were on other albums that I think of for the rhythms and the percussion. So, all right, number 14. I skipped over this. I had this in the wrong order. We finally do have Yes's Tormato, which is an album I don't love, but I don't hate as much as some people. Release is a banger. I've always liked Don't Kill the Whale. Even though a lot of this stuff sounds like stuff that didn't work on Going for the One or whatever. Arriving UFO is not bad. On the Silent Wings of Freedom. I don't know. I mean, having Yes above some of these other albums, this album, because I have it, I've listened to it, but I've never gotten attached to it. Kind of seems weird. I would probably put Talking Heads ahead of it right now, but just from familiarity. I'd put Happy the Man, maybe The Police and Genesis. But it's still a decent record. I think it's a little underrated, or it gets unfairly looked down upon. Have that at number 14. Number 13, Jethro Tull's Heavy Horses. An album that, like with Tull, their best records and their A and B level records stand out more. I'd say this is more on like a C plus if I'm doing a letter grade or ever do a tier list for them. The title track is my favorite on this. I revisited it a few weeks ago, or it was like sometime in early December, and I see this as the last sort of classic Jethro Tull record, and I've spent not too much time with many of the records since. I mean, I've got they won the Grammy for, but from '87 when they beat Metallica or whatever. It's good. It's similar to Songs from the Wood. Songs from the Wood I think was the year before, but it's not. It doesn't have as much like keyboards. It has more acoustic guitar. I suppose you could say. One Brown Mouse. That's one. Yeah. Weathercock. Yeah. Some of these songs work. Some of them are. No Lullaby is another one. That's almost 8 minutes. You get to the middle of the song, it starts to get going. And the Mouse Police Never Sleeps. So I mean, it's good. It's a record worth going back to, but as a whole, it's not quite the level a lot of Tull records. Granted, it's partly a product of the year. It finishes this high at number. Is it 13? Yeah, number 13. So all right, number 12. The debut album. A lot of debut albums this year. We have XTC. You have Bruford. You have this one. Debut album from Van Halen, of course, which I had my Van Halen phase per se. I bought all their albums in the mid-90s, and I knew them before that, but the debut album is somewhat of a classic. Running with the Devil, Eruption, the cover of You Really Got Me by the Kinks, Jamie's Crying, Ice Cream Man. Yeah, I mean, Ain't Talking About Love is another standard. I mean, it's a great record. I don't have a desire always to revisit it, and the radio has played a lot of those songs many times. They had a lot to say. It's impressive. I think it's properly rated from its reputation. I don't know if they made really a better full record with Roth. I mean, it's debatable, it's close, but it's a favorite album of many Van Halen fans, and I do not disagree with that. I'm with them to at least to an extent. So that's number 10. That's number 12. Number 11, Springsteen's first album since Born to Run '75. Darkness on the Edge of Town, which has one of my favorite tracks of all time by Bruce Springsteen, Candy's Room. I absolutely love the sort of the crescendo in that. The energy is just off the charts, and the guitar riff. The Promised Land, Prove It All Night, the title track, Badlands is a radio song. I mean, yeah, he's singing, he's got his vocal style you got to get used to, but I don't mind it. Factory, Streets of Fire. I mean, some of these are ballads. It's not as dark as you would get in the 80s at points, like with Nebraska, but I've always kind of found this to be sort of like the follow-up Kid Brother to Born to Run, but I think especially Candy's Room has made it. Racing the Street's another one I like. Candy's Room is it's just one of those songs that it kind of makes me think of this album and think, yeah, that track, Candy's Room, is such a banger. Love it. Love that track. If you've never heard that and you even are just a mild Springsteen fan, check out Candy's Room. 70s Springsteen, anyway. So now we're at number 10, which, this is, maybe I'm rating a little bit higher than that, because I revisited this. The debut album from UK. And I always struggled with liking full albums from UK. I like some songs, but the two records, it's like they're about equal. In the Dead of Night is like sort of it's like a suite. I think of this most for. Of course, this is the Supergroup, another album with Alan Holdsworth, which I'm not quite as bothered by, or I'm quite as distracted by him on this as opposed to on the Bruford album, which he's with Bruford, of course, on this. Wetton and Eddie Jobson. Time to Kill, Alaska. I mean, it's prog. It sounds less like Crimson than I remembered. It sounds more like, not even like ELP, or at this point ELP was not sounding like ELP, doing like Love Beach and stuff. So, Eddie Jobson is the kind of the star of this band in a lot of ways, even more than Wetton. So, anyway, the debut album from UK. Kevin Gilbert, of course, did there's one of the KMG series he does in the Dead of Night, and another track from that album. I think it was that or Danger Mine. I don't remember which one. He was trying to do a British accent like John Wetton too, which is it's funny. They were just messing around while they're warming up. In like the studio and everything like that. Number 9, Pat Metheny Group. The third album. I think this is the third Pat Metheny album, but I think this may be the debut album of the Pat Metheny Group. There's Pat Metheny and the Pat Metheny Group. This does not have Jaco Pastorius on it. However, there's a track titled Jaco. And when I was thinking of the early Pat Metheny, when I got into Pat Metheny, I always thought everyone raves about Bright Size Love because it has Jaco Pastorius. This is where it works. This is where Pat Metheny really became Pat Metheny, or the Pat Metheny Group really defined to me what I love a lot of Pat Metheny's sound. Even though he doesn't do as much of the synclavier synth guitar stuff, he did that more in the 80s. I think the other musicians that are on this, which I'm not sure if any of them were on any of the Pat Metheny albums. Lyle Mays, of course, his long relationship with him, Mark Egan, and Dan Gottlieb. Mark Egan sounds like Jaco on this. I don't know why Jaco wasn't. He wanted to work separately with a new bass player. That's why, because Jaco was with his own solo stuff and not with the Pat Metheny Group. But I like San Lorenzo, Phase Dance. Those two are my favorites on this. And then Lone Jack. Every one of those tracks leads to something really cool. It's like Return to Forever or Weather Report, but at the same time it's slightly different. That's why Pat Metheny has always stood out, or the Pat Metheny Group has always stood out from a standpoint of the style of jazz fusion. But yeah, this is a terrific record. Really not a bad track on it. Number 9. Number 8, Queen's Jazz, following up after News of the World, which I'm revisiting that. I was kind of disappointed with. This album I've always liked. It's become more renowned in the last 5 to 10 years because of the song Don't Stop Me Now, which, push comes to shove, I probably would go with that. That or Bicycle Race as my favorite track on it. But I guess Don't Stop Me Now never was. When I was growing up, people didn't talk about that. It wasn't played, but movies have been using that, in a lot of the superhero movies. A lot of the pop culture references in it. But it has, of course it has Fat Bottom Girls, which, that song and Bicycle Race, Mustafa, which is like a Middle Eastern song. It sounds like Middle Eastern, like I don't know, listening to Ravi Shankar or something like that. And then Jealousy, that's the other kind of excellent track on I think of this album for. But yeah, like every song is like different, especially the second half of it. But very good Queen record. I mean, it's not to me peak Queen. You know, Night at the Opera, Day at the Races, Queen, Sheer Heart Attack, Queen 2. But it's definitely in the next group. When Brennan and I from Death by Unicorn do our tier list, don't be surprised that to finish pretty high. I would guess I can't remember what he said for where he had it in his 78 list, but I'm pretty sure he put it pretty high on that list as well. Or he had it pretty high on his list. I don't know if he had it as high as number 8, but I think he only did top 10. So number 7, another fusion record, Al Di Meola's third solo album of the classic kind of start to his career, Casino. While this doesn't sound as like sort of soundtrack like, this sounds more like almost ethnic or worldy at points. Egyptian Danza, which Liquid Tension Experiment, I believe, even covered that live in their early days. One of the first tour for the brief tour they did. But this is whatever on Columbia. The Columbia Al Di Meola records are sort of, you can't miss with them really. The first four or first 5. See, his version of Senior Mouse, I'll say, I don't like as much as the one that's done with, it was Chic or Chick's Return to Forever. But if I'm not mistaken, that was before Al was with Return to Forever, so that's why he wanted to do that. He does have Jan Hammer on here, Steve Gadd, a bunch of, it's a fusion record. It's got a lot of, I guess I could open up and look. And every one of his 70s especially has just like a fantastic roster. Yeah, Steve Gadd. I'm trying to think who else I remember seeing on here. Barry Miles does the piano work. So actually, Jan Hammer, I'm wrong about that. I thought he played on this. He played on like the previous two. The Fantasia Suite for 2 guitars is awesome. The title track. I mean, yeah, he's kind of mood, but I mean, he's kind of a mood music. If I want to hear some, very very busy jazz guitar music, jazzy guitar music that's, it's fusion with a lot of keyboards. The difference is I think he used more acoustic and more ethnic sounds on this than he had done on Land of the Midnight Sun or on Elegant Gypsy. But anyway, Al Di Meola's Casino at number 7. Number 6, okay, I don't have a copy of this. It's a classic record that you don't see the records that often. Occasionally, but I don't seek them out. I should be. Toto's debut album, so that's like, what, the 3rd or 4th debut between that, Pat Metheny Group, UK, Van Halen, and Bruford, and XTC. That's like, I got like 7 or 8 debut albums on here. Dire Straits is like the 8th one. But yeah, Toto's debut album is awesome. I love, Hold the Line, Georgie Porgy, I'll Supply the Love. Those are sort of yacht rock staples. Classic rock and yacht rock staples. But the whole record is really good. The song Angela, I think it is, the last track, it's awesome. They probably play it live, but it's not it doesn't get the radio play that, obviously like some of their other big hits, including those ones I just talked about. So, Toto's another one that I'm completely guilty of not knowing their catalog. I know the radio stuff. I even saw them live within the last year, but anyway, so that's number 6. Number 5, Renaissance, Song for All Seasons. What I kind of see as the last of that sort of run of just record after record after record that just is so good. And it has, I just hope I didn't damage my music here. It has, of course, the title track. That's the biggest banger on here. It's talking about the different seasons, but it's epic. When I got that second Tales from 1000 Whites compilation, that was the song I liked the most among the ones I hadn't heard. Because I just got those compilations when I first became a fan before collecting other albums. But it has, a few other staples. I mean, I guess I have my own Renaissance bias. That's partly why it's finishing number 5. And I don't see Closer Than Yesterday, Northern Lights. I'm spacing on that. My Renaissance knowledge should be better. It has Northern Lights, which is probably the closest thing they ever had to having a pop hit, which is a minor pop hit. I mean, they had songs that ended up on some radio stations, Renaissance, but that's why they're sort of never reached like the sort of Yes or Genesis level. But yeah, I mean, it's a record I've always enjoyed. I just can't read the artwork. If you look at this, it just gives the lineup, of course. It's on Sire, this version, but yeah, I mean, Annie and the gang in the classic lineup, they were still doing prog. I think Song for All Seasons is like a 10-minute track. So number 5, number 4. I think the only live album I have on this one. I had a few other years where I had plenty of live albums. 2 for the Show from Kansas. Really great live album. When I first got into Kansas, I bought a compilation, and I eventually bought that singles box set and bought this. I didn't have any of the albums, but this kind of introduced me to some other tracks like Icarus, Born on Wings of Steel, Journey from Marybrown, of course. I think that was a single, though. I think it's long. Mysteries and Mayhem, The Wall, Magnum. It's great. There's a really great live feel to this record. Most people that like prog live albums, this is one of the top 5 to 10, and that's why it's ended up this high. I mean, partly, again, 78, much, not nearly as deep as 77, 76, 75. So we'll see what happens with 79. All right, here's the real sort of wild card, out of nowhere record that I just finally acquired on vinyl. I was really happy to find this. I found it for dirt cheap on Discogs. This thing hasn't even been opened. This is an artist by the name of Alec R. Constantinos and the Syncophonic Orchestra. The album Romeo and Juliet. It's 2 tracks. They're each like 20 minutes long. It's 4 acts. It's a concept album about Romeo and Juliet. I don't know if the movie had come out. There have been how many versions of the movie? There's one that I had to watch when I was in high school. DiCaprio, of course, did one with Claire Danes in the 90s. But what this really is this is like prog dance music or prog funk dance. It's got this riff, this motif that's infectious, and the track, it's almost like a Donna Summer record. It's awesome. The musicianship is off the charts. The drum work especially. If you've never heard it, if you like Donna Summer, Georgie Moroder, that kind of sort of very hot, tight musicianship with very fast-moving rhythms, and you like synthesizer leads and some other orchestral parts, this is something you should check out from 1978, Romeo and Juliet from Alec R. Constantinos and Symphonic Orchestra. I don't have any idea what he did besides this, to be honest. I know I stumbled across this probably 20 years ago or 15 years ago. Some friends of mine I'm talking about and raving about it, and I was like, yeah, this is really damn good. So it's prog, because it, 2 20-minute pieces, and it's not a soundtrack to a movie exactly. It's kind of like Marscape, or much better than the Robin Lumley, Jack Lancaster adaptation to Peter and the Wolf. So number 2, we have the big band Styx, and really their last, what I could say, classic record. They put out some records after this I like, but this is the last run of 4 or 5 records. Pieces of 8, excellent record beginning to end. Of course it has Blue Collar Man was a radio hit, but the title track is awesome. Great White Hope, I'm Okay, Sing for the Day, Lords of the Ring, not Lord of the Rings. Renegade 2 was the other hit. Queen of Spades is a favorite of mine. I mean, this is almost a perfect record. I lean toward Grand Illusion slightly, but it's like 1A and 1B for Styx's Pieces of 8. And of course, no surprise, people have been sitting here watching this 20-plus minute video. I'm going with the obvious, Hemispheres, my favorite Rush record. This is the red version I'm holding up, which I'm not going to pull out, but Cygnus X1 Book 2 is the best thing Rush ever did to me, even though Geddy was singing out of his vocal range, but the crescendo and the different riffs, the parts, it's dreaming. I think of this, I heard it before that, but when my freshman year of college, walking across the campus, I listened to this a lot of Rush albums I was still listening to, Hold Your Fire, at that point, but plus I love Circumstances, underrated, banger track, and The Trees is fantastic. Their best sort of most accessible song up to that point. I like it much better than Closer to the Heart, even though I don't hate Closer to the Heart. And of course, La Via Strangiato, which, push comes to shove, is probably my favorite Rush instrumental, though I don't revere it the way a lot of people is. This record, I still consider a perfect record. But I've been choosing between, besides the, Cygnus X1 Book 2, the Hemispheres, I don't know if La Via Strangiato might be my least favorite part of the whole record, and I love it. So that's it for 1978. Post your top 5, 10, 15, 20 records from 78. I'd love to see it. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Please ring the notification bell because it helps with YouTube's algorithm. I'll be doing 1979 hopefully soon. It's not a total spoiler, but 79 I've viewed as one of the least deep years for music, and But I've found some stuff here and there. But I mean, 78, 79, 80, we get into the 80s. In 1980, I can say, that's not really spoiling much. I prefer 1980 vastly over 1979. And push comes to stuff I preferred over 1978 from a depth standpoint. But yeah, I don't know. I want to do these, but I'm going to try doing them with those sort of 10cc and Ultravox. And again, this is like in, who knows, a year, 2, 3 years from now. I probably want to redo this or do this with the group because some of this stuff could get some movement. And again, I haven't heard those 2 records, and there's records I haven't heard. So again, thank you for watching. Again, please subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and we'll see you next time.